Hello everybody, it's AJ back again for the Mighty Gluestick channel. Time for another Lord of the Lower Planes, this one voted on by the community. I bring you Mephistopheles. Historically, Mephistopheles has only been around since the 16th century, a product of classic German folklore, first appearing in the written tale of Faust. The name Mephistopheles, or Mephisto, or Mephistopheles, or Mephistopheles, and so on, is a combination of either Hebrew, meaning the scatterer of lies, or Greek, meaning one who shuns the light, a parody of the name Lucifer, which means light bearer. The fictional legend of Faust is based on the historical scholar Johann Georg Faust, and in the story, Faust encounters Mephistopheles as he tries to summon and do a deal with the devil. He runs across Mephistopheles in the woods outside Wittenberg in the guise of a grey friar. And Mephistopheles actually advises Faust against the course of action, saying it is not too late to enter the gates of heaven. This is an interesting feature of Mephistopheles in many literary works. He's not a devil who goes out of his way to corrupt the innocent and claim their soul. Rather, he appears to those who have already damned themselves, and as more of a mentor, and entwined them into his service through more subtle means. In many ways, Mephistopheles is a figure that the damned find they empathize with, and he is a being as much trapped in his own hell as those he turns to his side. Thus, instead of wasting time and effort on souls contracting against their will, his hell is filled with those who come to him fully understanding what they're doing, what they're losing, and what they had to gain. In Dungeons & Dragons, Mephistopheles is an archdevil of hell, the lord of no mercy, the cold lord of Carnia, the eighth layer of the 9 hells. He is a 9-foot-tall, classically devilish-looking being with a powerful muscular body, long horns, long, straight, raven-black hair, large bat-like wings, and large, sumptuous but imposing black cape. His appearance is evil incarnate, and he looks like he could tear a man to bloody bits in seconds. In his first appearance in Advanced Dungeons & Dragons, he had blue-black skin, with eyes that were white with red iris and pupils, but by 3rd edition he had his modern appearance of red wings, skin, horns and eyes with black hair and cape. He wields a 3-pronged ranseur, which is a polearm of fabulous gold finery encrusted with gems. The 8th layer of hell, Carnia, is a lightless frozen realm of incredible cold, causing frostbite within hours. There are many corpses frozen perfectly that scatter the place, and the place may appear to be lifeless, a wasted dead land of Arctic death, a place where things are discarded and left in frozen solitude. But this is deceptive because the place is swarming with all kinds of evil, horrible things. First of all, if a character tries to shelter themselves and light a fire, they will immediately attract the attention of the insectoid, 12-foot-tall Galugons, the ice devils. These devils are highly intelligent strategists who use their supernatural ice spears to slow and immobilize their victims. Actually, a famous Galugon named Vressa led an attempt to conquer the entire world of Toril from a portal in the Great Glacier in 1366 DR. He was stopped by a Harper Ranger named Martin and a former paladin named Wilhelm, but I digress. Carnia is chock full of concealed locations, locked or hidden away in the thick, jagged and icy terrain, which is kind of like someone attacked Antarctica with gigantic hammers, leaving splintered mountains and crevasses filled with foothills of huge irregular icebergs. There are icy cities with forgotten libraries, ghost-haunted palaces, and cities encased in ice, holding angels and spine horrors of unknown origin. In the underground caverns there are absolutely horrific undead angels of terrible power, locked away in shrieking torment. Mephistopheles rules the citadel of Mephistar, a white-blue jewel with walls of carved glacial ice. The interior is actually very hot and contains lavish heated baths, scented fires, and tapestries of actual flame, some of living, twitching flesh and organs arranged to appear as animated scenes of the endless blood war. Galugon nobles wait on Mephistopheles. Many are gathered in horrific alchemical contraptions that enhance their ability to maintain strategic oversight on distant wars between fiendish armies and the forces of chaos. Some work on plans for tremendous war machines or tabulate reports on troop displacements, recruitment and assignment to various battles taking place constantly across the prime material world or the outer planes. There is a spectacular enclosure called the Garden of Frost, a frozen facsimile of a living garden with things that seem like plants and animals of unknown and very exotic origin. Many devils live here in tenements. The lowest ranking devils live in squalor at the bottom, while greater devils live in the vast suites at the top, with every perverse and sickening vice catered for, if they merit such rewards under the strict and ever-present bureaucracy of hell. Another notable location in Carnia is the School of Hellfire, which is 99 stories tall, made of Baatorian green steel and surrounded by poisonous vapour. The dean is a pit fiend named Quagrim, and as you would imagine, this is where talented devils can learn the secrets of wielding hellfire. The school is located on the frozen layer of Carnia for obvious reasons. Citadel Mephistopheles is set into a strange glacier called Nargus that roams around under the control and direction of Mephistopheles, obliterating lesser glaciers. The glacier has wiped out entire invading fiendish armies and is extremely difficult to traverse without being swallowed up and ground into frozen dust in its churning flow. Kintyre is an interesting location among thousands, but there is a particular place that mortals should fear. It's a lost city entombed under the ice with thousands of mortals and fiends slowly and carefully attempting to excavate it in a vast open pit mine with many stepped tiers, packed with damned souls toiling under the flame whips of fiends as monstrous titans haul piles of frozen rubble and junk out of the pit, and the constant rattle of massive chain pulleys and the whips and screams echo over the howling blizzard winds. This is the lost city of Kintyre, which is which is owned by a lesser archdevil, located between two mountains. The archdevil was destroyed for being one of the betrayers whom Mephistopheles exposed as he assumed a different form called Molokroth, and pretended to lead a rebellion against himself, turning on his gathered allies at the last moment, the fates of which are as varied as they are brutal and cruel. In the case of this place, the traitor was slaughtered and entombed in ice. However, Mephistopheles learned that there is an artifact hidden away in the city, but the slain archdevil's ancient wards hide it from all devils. Mephistopheles forces mortal prisoners to search for it, but none have survived the excursion, despite the apprentice Hellfire students endlessly practicing on them, summoning whips, prods and such, while also searing through the rock and hard ice with their Hellfire. This is not the deepest pit in Carnia, however. There is a portal to Nesis, which is a seemingly bottomless chasm lined with guard towers and arching bridges of ice, packed with 9,999 galleons who guard the entrance to Nesis and the super fortress called Malshim, the lair of Asmodeus. The ice devils are not the most difficult bit to get through, though. When you reach the bottom, you have to plunge into an icy lake and swim 10,000 fathoms through icy slush before reaching a massive portal of ice and corrupted silver. Not everyone is happy about the School of Hellfire being located on the frozen layer of Carnia, of course. There is a mountain fortress called Nebulat, full of pissed-off galleons, led by an archdevil called Tencheth, and they spy on the School of Hellfire, plotting ways to hamper its activities and make it appear inept and inefficient, while at the same time they're working on a new type of cold-based magic called the Plume, which is capable of snap-freezing the blood of any living creature. How this pans out, I leave to you. Mephisto has some of the most capable espionage forces in all of the Nine Hells. The General Corrin is the head of the Serpentine Order, with a legion of shape-shifting assassins who are very good at taking on the form of other types of devils and demons. They often play a critical role in the Blood War, with occasional missions to murder mortals on the prime material worlds, but such activity is a woeful waste of their valuable time. There are infernal creatures that are now native to Carnia, such as the massive ice sharks, mammoths, and a few white dragons. Other creatures adapted to the most brutal cold conditions and lack of food or water will hunt and eat the miserable lemures and the occasional imp. Devils could wipe them all out easily, but they prefer to keep the environment particularly dangerous for escaped captives, and those who don't swiftly die from the eternal cold, or any who dare approach this close to Nesis uninvited. Mephistopheles keeps the realm deliberately inhospitable, and he keeps the ice devils busy with their rivalries and plots among each other. He has many powerful allies and even more powerful enemies. He even openly declares that he intends to one day rule over all of the Nine Hells, usurping Asmodeus. Such arrogance is no idle boasting. He fully intends to supplant Asmodeus one day, and privately rages that he has consistently failed to do so already. So let's take a visit to the citadel of Mephistopheles. Here the air is sweltering under the ever-present heat of his most famous innovation, Hellfire. It burns eternally from hundreds of thousands of braziers and sconces. It flickers like a carpet underfoot, spreading in ornate and quite beautiful patterns, all the colours of flame. Most is safe to walk on, but any visitor here who is not resistant to or immune to fire will find many areas of the citadel that are off limits. As much as a hot plate of a barbecue is off limits to me. Ice devils fill the place, along with every other kind of devil in fewer numbers, though there are very few lemures here. They're mostly restricted to laboratories, of which there are many, but more on that in a moment. Mephistopheles is a thronging place full of activity. It is streaming with devils taking files and tomes, concealed objects and secure packages and crates from one location to another. There are hundreds of passages and rooms that are more of a stark utilitarian appearance, but can be quite noisy. But in areas where the master of the domain resides, it is almost deathly quiet. Aside from the soft kind of creepy music playing and the burbling of fountains and hot pools, the soft clinks of fine cutlery and serving platters and the soft shuffle of feet on the glistening marble, flickering flame rugs and the respectful thuds of doors opening and closing carefully, Mephistopheles' chamberlain, Barbas, is actually a Duke of Hell, serving as Mephistopheles' chamberlain. Barbas appears as a giant bearded man with large lips and enormous belly. He wears voluminous robes which conceal a forked tail, hooves, and crimson skin, covered with thick oily hair. Barbas is as lazy and gross-bodied, but sneak-quick in battle. As chamberlain, he manages the household of Mephistopheles, and is kind of the head servant in charge of all the other staff who serve the Lord. If you happen to encounter a 5.5-foot tall, sleek and curvaceous human-appearing she-devil with cinnamon-coloured skin, ruby-red eyes, forked tail, as well as slim, delicate leathery wings, who appears young and carefree, but when angered, her eyes glow with flames and her musical voice becomes very harsh, that would be Mephistopheles' consort, Baator. You should be on your guard if she dislikes you, and absolutely terrified if she does like you. Anywhere in the massive complex where there is food, there is a chance of encountering Adonidas, a young, long-haired, darkly handsome man of giant stature. He has unusual glittering black eyes and a fanged grin. The hair hides 2 small horns, and Adonidas wears robes to hide his forked tail and scarlet torso. He is the steward and ensures Mephistopheles is served exactly what he wants, and that his preferred meals and morsels are always just a snap of his fingers away from near instant delivery to his lord. The kitchens and culinary fare available in this place are beyond incredible. From the private kitchens that serve only the lord, his consort, in any rare instances where they have a guest, all the way down to the slop pits and feed buckets that pass as food down in the lowest squalid levels, where the only meat served might very well have been talking to you from the cell next door just the day before. Taking care of the governance of non-service staff and the movement of resources and general day-to-day operations of Mephistopheles is the role of Justicar Bell. Bell appears as a tall, handsome, hollow-eyed man with ivory skin, a curled beard and pencil-thin moustache, a low, nasal voice, tiny horns and long black robes. Beneath the robes are concealed a short forked tail, a crimson-skinned lower torso, and a belt bearing Bell's black rod of office and a dagger full of venom. When Bell disrobes, his leathery wings can spread to a surprisingly large 20-foot wingspan, which is something that most people don't know. He is possessed of an extraordinary ability to convey deadly intimidation very quietly and calmly, and his inhuman intellect never leaves a task incomplete, including making good on even the most subtle and seemingly offhand threat that he may happen to utter. If something is going on in Mephistopheles, he most likely knows about it before it happens. Mordenkainen's Tome of Hose makes specific mention of Mephistopheles' main lieutenant, Hutagin. Hutagin closely resembles a pit fiend, but he's actually a greater, higher-ranking being. His head is larger than a pit fiend's proportionately, and his wings are smaller. His hide is a deep rust-red hue, and bathed in crackling lightning and electricity. He carries a writhing trident, and personally commands 2 entire companies of pit fiends, and all the forces under them. Another very capable lieutenant is in charge of the older local garrison. Bifrons appears as a wingless, grey-skinned and heavily muscled devil with a humanoid torso and a snake-like lower half from the hip down with no legs. He has stubby horns on his brow and totally white slanted eyes, large nostrils and mouth, and a deep rumbling voice. He commands fully 26 companies of ice devils. So, to cut the military jargon, that's 2,080 to 3,900 ice devils under his personal command. Also, Mephistopheles' throne room, which he makes a point of visiting on a regular basis to receive reports and assign orders to his vassals, has a massive ancient red dragon named Lord Testaroun. One notable thing about this dragon is that he has learned how to breathe hellfire and has been personally enchanted by Mephistopheles to be immune to cold. He mainly just keeps him there to keep the place as intimidating as possible to visitors. But what of Mephistopheles himself, this aloof and scheming overlord who would gladly take over the rulership of the Nine Hells? To quote Mordenkainen's Tome of Foes, with a bit of commentary from me in there, the foremost wizard of the Hells, Mordenkainen suffers nothing that would compromise his intellectual focus. He hates distractions and allows only particular devils to speak to him without first being spoken to. So if you're not going to be teleporting into his main throne room or anywhere in Mephistar that he considers his personal quarters. He would also probably have agents that keep an eye on the city of Sigil in the event that any doorway to Mephistar or Carnia are discovered. He has been known to disintegrate minions for the smallest transgressions and sometimes carries out an execution simply because he suspected that the devil was about to do or say something to annoy him. Which sounds pretty crazy, but, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And in most cases, devils are not destroyed when they get physically disintegrated. They're just basically busted back to being a lemure. A fate worse than death, if you ask me. Carnia is like the mad wizard lab and magic testing ground of hell, so it attracts spies like rotten meat attracts flies. Mephistopheles' forces are constantly alert for agents from Dis, since it greatly pains Baator that Mephistopheles might come across a scrap of information that he doesn't possess, and others from across the multiverse would certainly risk a grim fate for the arcane secrets they might discover. A number of renowned archmages, including Mordenkainen, have at times found their way into this realm on search for forgotten lore or in the hope of confirming a theory of arcane magic. The fools. Mephistopheles and his followers specialize in luring wizards and sages into making compacts with the Nine Hells. Of all the Lords of the Nine, he has the lowest quota, but the highest standards. He harvests the souls of skilled wizards and cunning sages, exactly the sort of folk he needs to further his research. Curiosity and ambition are motivating factors that entice such souls into his service. Often, a mage who gets an opportunity to join the cause of Mephistopheles sees that invitation as proof of his ascension to greatness. Now, this is a little bit in tune with the traditional lore of Mephistopheles. He's more likely to keep close tabs on mages, sages, and scholars who have an insatiable thirst for knowledge that is leading them down an increasingly dark path. And right as they cross this threshold into actions that violate divine law, he steps in and offers both his services and the promises of more knowledge than the mortal ever dreamed of. Sadly, most leap at this chance, even though Mephistopheles has been known to warn mortals that they are condemning themselves to an eternity in the Nine Hells. And once they sign their soul over to him, he also feels obliged to demonstrate that the sage or wizard is no great genius, no prodigy. They're just another fool who lusts for knowledge and power, that's robbed them of their common sense. He puts them to work in dull and routine, endless tasks, studying texts and performing the same task over and over with slight variations, all carefully recorded and checked by others who are equally unhappy with their fate. Of course, as a devil, his contracts are ironclad, devious and comprehensive. Also, he isolates his minions, allowing them to gather only in small groups when they need to carry on their work. Even then, the law of Mephistopheles prohibits all but the most vital communication. Some of the most skilled but most gullible former wizards of the material plane now toil eternally in Carnia, alone except for their books, their tools, and their regrets, which, in a way, provides cold comfort to the Lord of the Eighth Hell, who often feels exactly the same way. Libraries and other places where arcane knowledge is recorded are all contained as scattered across Carnia, mainly to ensure that a single disastrous experiment doesn't destroy the evidence of all the work conducted on other sites. In his pursuit of ever more lore, Mephistopheles combines his prodigious intellect with his obsessive nature. The combination of traits now enables him to delve far more deeply into a topic than most ordinary wizards can even conceive of. Even more so than a lich, he's immortal. He can conceivably study something forever. Even the tiniest of trivialities is fascinating to him. Sometimes, however, the business of the Nine Hells, the politics and wars, force him to relinquish direct oversight on a project. When he returns to his research, A new mystery might capture his fancy, while the older project continues to move forward without his oversight or interference. Here and there, tucked away in Carnia's terrible environment and similarly buried in the immense bureaucracy of the Hells, long isolated citadels occupied by sages and spellcasters, toiling away on some seemingly forgotten endeavour. The supervisors of these projects may be itching to share their incredible results that they've patiently waited to hand over to Mephistopheles the next time his attention points in their direction. Who knows what secrets lay in the frozen hell of Carnia, awaiting discovery? What terrible horrors lurk in the hundreds and thousands of ancient laboratories, with ever more devious, desperate and despotic means developed in order to fight the eternal blight of the demonic corruption of the multiverse. But in the prime material plane, many worlds host cults to Mephistopheles, while many more have cults to Asmodeus that are actually set up by and manipulated by Mephistopheles on behalf of his sovereign. Most mortals couldn't tell the difference between the two lords of hell anyway. Those drawn to his worship are usually schemers and megalomaniacs, and he also has a substantial following among fire giants who long to learn the secrets of hellfire. His temples are strange places, hidden and out of the way, decorated with fire pits. They're unbearably hot, and the pits are rigged so that they flare up during ceremonies at the most dramatic moments. The cultists meet to perform sacrifices, binding their living victim onto a blackened altar and immolating him alive. His screams add to their silent prayers. So, what is hellfire? Seems to be pretty important to the Nine Hells and the central concern for Carnia's mad science. In a nutshell, it is fire augmented by the power of the soul, to burn hotter than any normal flame. Those who wield it in older editions would expend constitution points temporarily in order to add increased damage dice to any target hit by the hellfire. In 5th edition, this constitution drain can be represented by gaining levels of exhaustion, for example. If a hellfire warlock uses up all their spell slots and continues to augment the eldritch blast with their infernal flame, or perhaps use an enslaved soul, drawing on the accumulated souls to unleash tremendous amounts of destruction. Not only does the supernatural fire burn hotter, it overcomes ordinary fire resistance. Those who are schooled in its use can even form a body shield of hellfire around themselves, which, rather than grant protection, instead immolates anything that comes too close to them. Unwise mortals who cannot handle the demands of hellfire have been known to burn from the inside out, and its use is generally forbidden between mages in conflict with each other, as it's so difficult to defend against. On the mortal plane, 4 known copies of a book written by a monk called Andros are said to exist. These texts are called the Book of Brimstone and include instruction for the proper worship of Mephistopheles, as well as a small selection of spells involving the use of hellfire. There is a foot-wide ruby called the Heart of Mephistopheles, currently in the possession of a pit fiend called Baator. The ruby is said to contain a portion of the Archdevil's intellect, and no devil within a mile of the stone can be forced to return to the Nine Hells by magical means. Also, whoever owns it can use it to dominate and kill others with various spell-like effects. Mephistopheles is allied with the Baator, and while despised by most other archdevils, particularly Beelzebul, he can call on them for help if more than 2 other archdevils ally themselves against him, for various reasons. He has some recent history in the world of Toril. Not too long ago, after 1372 DR, a drow matron, afterwards known to history only as the Valkyries, managed to bind Mephistopheles into her service on the material plane in Toril. Aided by his powers, she proceeded to conquer much of the Underdark and even went on to try to expand her influence on the surface, attacking Waterdeep through Undermountain. Previously, an adventurer fleeing the briefly reactivated but now again falling nethery city of Untitled into the plane of shadow had come across a strange relic that they had used to occasionally access a small plane of strange creature known as Reaper. This item was, in fact, meant for the leader of the cult of Mephistopheles and contained a piece of the devil's own flesh. Later, the adventurer, by then quite famous and powerful, came to Waterdeep to aid the city in its struggle against Valkyries' forces. Mephistopheles manipulated the Valkyries to eventually bring the adventurer into the inner sanctum, where she ordered him to kill him. At this point, her control over Mephistopheles was loosened, since the relic carried by the adventurer bound him to the archdevil, and by ordering him to kill the adventurer, she broke the pact which she had used to bind him. Instead of complying, Mephistopheles left the adventurer and his party free to duel and kill the Valkyries. and he then sent them to Carnia in his stead and set out to conquer Toril, intending to turn it into a new layer of hell that he would go down below the ninth and make him a new supreme ruler of the plane. He raised the dead souls he had gained from the recent battles between the laboratories and his enemies as a special form of spiritual army, and began to follow a similar course of conquest to hers, advancing from the Underdark to Waterdeep. However, the adventurer, who had by this time grown in power far beyond most other mortals, was able to escape Carnia by learning the Reaper's true name, Hekugoth the Abandoned, and returned to Toril and banished Mephistopheles back to his old domain before he could destroy the City of Splendors. According to this account, Mephistopheles' true name is Triaxophil the Ambitious. It can be deduced, however, that since Mephistopheles remains a threat to the planes as nobody's slave, and the adventurer either did not learn this or choose for some reason not to use the true name for its full potential. One final note. The politics of Carnia are ancient, and while Mephistopheles rules supreme there for now, it was not always so. Also, his recent obsession with Hellfire and locating the school of Hellfire on Carnia has sown a lot of resentment among the Ice Devils. But he knows that mortals will flock to his side to learn the secrets of Hellfire, and his research on it is relentless, taking over many of his labs and other activities. The expansion is taking its toll on his soul-harvesting efforts, and he has been forced to borrow divine energy from other archdukes, particularly Baator and Levistus, at an alarming rate. Mephistopheles is risking much on his gamble with Hellfire, and if it pays off, his mortal cult will be larger and more popular than any other archdukes, including Asmodeus. The fact that many mortals can't tell the difference between Mephistopheles and Asmodeus causes the Lord of the Nine no end of amusement, but causes Mephistopheles to often fly into incredibly violent, destructive rages in the privacy of his infernal realm. The rest of the time, he's actually very charming, soft-spoken, and of course extremely level-headed and insightful with a dizzying intellect. And that's about it for Carnia and Mephistopheles. Thanks for listening, everybody. I'll be back with more for you again very soon.